Hello, and so welcome to another episode of Virtue and Virtuosity. And today, rather than a normal interview, I thought instead we could go in with a big question. And today's big question that we're going to try and answer is how much benefit in the charity sector we got from big CRMs over the past 10 years. Now, to answer such a big question, I really wanted to get an all-star panel lineup. If this was like a charity NFP tech version of the Graham Norton show, it's like we've got all of the stars. We've got Tom Cruise, George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Taylor Swift, all of us. We're all on the same show here. And what a way to introduce everyone. So maybe if we just go around now, just do some intros, just who we've got here, your role and what you've done in the world of charity CRMs. And we'll start with Laura.
Hello. Thank you, Stuart. I'm a little bit worried as to which of the above stars we're all supposed to be, but I'm not gonna fret about that. So my name's Laura Dawson. I was the Chief Information Officer at the London School of Economics, and prior to that, I spent a lot of time in the not-for-profit space in the charity world, so RSPB, Save the Children, British Council, and I was also chair of Charity IT Leaders, and I've got extensive exposure into the world of either implementing or trying to replace various CRM products with CRM platforms, both Dynamics and Salesforce, replacing products such as Care or Razor's Edge. So, quite a lot of involvement in that space over the last far too many years to state. Over to you. Back to you, Stuart.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. And I'll move on to Kevin next.
Hi, thanks. I'll happily take the Meryl Streep role. So I'm actually Kevin Antao. I'm a freelance technology advisor in the non-profit area. I'm pretty passionate about digital transformation and the contribution to social impact. Like Laura, I've led global teams. I used to be the CIO at Amnesty International. I'm currently helping charities such as the NSPCC and Alzheimer's Research UK to reimagine supporter engagement through various digital data and technology initiatives. CRM's always been part of my, sadly to say, 29-year career history in the for-profit sector, in oil and gas trading, as well as in government, as well as now in the charity sector. So I see it really as the beating heart of an organisation and central to customer and audience-facing work that we do. So I really love it, and it's a real great pleasure to be here on such a distinguished panel with Hollywood stars as well. So back to you, Stuart.
Thank you. I love it that I've got a distinguished panel. And carrying on with the panel, over to you, Tory.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm very honoured to be invited onto this podcast. So I'm Tory Cassie, Director of Nonprofit at mhance. I haven't worked for charities, unlike Kevin and Laura. So I work at mhance. So we are leaders in the Microsoft platform for solutions for nonprofits. So, in terms of my experience of working with Salesforce and Dynamics, I don't have that. I live and breathe and have done for about 28 years, all things Microsoft in the nonprofit sector. So, like both, Kevin and Laura, love what I do, love making a difference. Hopefully that's a good segue into the topic of the podcast. But, seeing how Microsoft technologies can really make a difference to all those good causes. So we work with organizations such as RSPB, Mind, Blood Cancer, Salvation Army, Christian Aid, Cats Protection, so forth. So yeah, I'm on the other side, I suppose, and how we put them on and how we make a difference.
Thanks, Tory. You say the other side. We're all on the same side here. But for the sake of a good panel debate, it's quite helpful to have it. As we talk here, this podcast and the discussion is all meant to be independent. We're trying to be fair. We're trying to be unbiased. It's not about Microsoft. It's not about Salesforce. It's not about it's all of these things. And so, although we come from different perspectives and we've seen these projects and programs from different angles, I suspect as we talk through this, we will have some similar views on what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years. And I guess so the reason for doing this is because we spent within the charity sector, we've put a lot of effort and spent a lot of money on CRMs in the last 10 years. And in the future, I suspect we'll be spending a lot of money and effort on CRMs, but also on other things. And it's always good to look back and see what's given us value for money, what approaches have worked, what things haven't worked, so as we can actually try and learn from this for the future. And I think maybe a great place to start might be to think about some of the things that have helped give us success and some of the things that have pushed us more towards the problem side of things. And so I don't know if anyone wants to leap in to start off with. So talking about any CRM work they've been involved in the last 10 to 15 years and how they've seen it either go really well or some of the challenges they've run into.
So I want to take it back a little bit and sort of look at it, both the benefits and kind of what can go a little bit wrong. One of the things that I think has been a benefit that I've seen every single time is the improvement to operational activity in specific areas. So where somebody is doing something that's repeated and frequent, and they've been able to just focus in and deliver that within their own unit, within their own area, it doesn't hand off to anyone else. There's no kind of end-to-end process that straddles lots of different bits of the organization. And I've seen most implementations where CRM has come, they've got that bit right. And there's probably that as a starting point for then what potentially goes wrong, because that is very much looking at CRM as a product, even if what you've bought is a platform. And I see that. So I see the benefit of them delivering it at an operational level. I can see it where they're not having handovers to other parts, but anywhere where you touch the rest of the organization, that's where it starts to maybe not deliver the benefit that's expected, and to deliver that one source of the truth that everybody's looking for. So I think from a kind of very basic level, most organizations are getting that bit right.
And that's a great place to start from, Laura. But I think what you've described there is the dream project. When you're a CTO or something like that, you come across that project, you think, thank heavens, that's one we can win at. We can really succeed at that. But then obviously things get a bit more complicated, because projects generally, as you said, that's looking at it as a product rather than a platform. And if you're really going to get the benefits, things go a lot further beyond that. Kevin, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, and I think Laura's approach is absolutely right, to just step back a minute and think about those changes that we've made, which have really made a big benefit for the organization, but also ask a counter question around what actually would we do without CRMs. And there's a lot I can say to that, particularly at smaller charities where I've seen things like, fragmented data management or manual processes or use of Excel or those kind of things. And they really come home to roost actually on that. But where I think it works really, really well, I'll give you an example. I'm a digital trustee of a fairly small charity called Blueprint for All, which looks after sort of people who are come from disadvantaged backgrounds between 18 to 30. And this was a real reimagination of a CRM for a service outcome around reaching out to that demographic and creating a new inclusive opportunities portal. So a real reimagination in this case of Salesforce. And in true Meryl Streep style, I'm going to go straight to my Oscar. We won the Digital Charity Times Digital Transformation of the Year off the back of this. So being able to reimagine these tools as engagement tools for the mission, the very mission that we serve, and it was quite an inspiring thing. So they can be enormously beneficial. They can unlock, particularly if you're a small or mid-sized charity, moving through the gears and having wider scale and wider growth. They're really, really important. So I thought I'd just highlight that.
Thanks, Kevin. And Tori, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I think defining CRM is probably one of the biggest things, right? We talk about CRM and customer relationship management. I know the sector went through that XRM. It's not just the customer that you're managing; it's just your donors, your beneficiaries, your supporters, your suppliers, partners, whatever it may be. But you're right. I think sometimes when organisations are looking at just replacing care, just replacing Raised Edge, if you're looking at something like Salesforce, all Dynamics, it's not just about that. It's wider than that. It includes digital. It includes Power Apps, for example, for collecting data in the field for grants. You wouldn't typically say that was CRM, or your help and advice on a case management and contact center. So CRM isn't what it used to be, and that 360-degree view of that support it's not just that. It's far wider, and I think organizations who are implementing a CRM system, it's all about going back to the I suppose controlling the scope, but these platforms are far more than just managing your supporter data. And that's what, the benefits are going to come when organizations actually realize that, we're not just replacing a legacy system or a system with a nice badge of Microsoft or Salesforce, whatever, the benefits are far wider than that.
I would like to, would more than like to, I agree with you, Tory. I think the problem comes in the maturity and the position of the organization for when that's happening. And we see far too often people are buying something like Salesforce or CRM to replace care or something similar. And they don't think about the full breadth of the scope properly. They haven't got that ability to get the vision and understand the impact in terms of costs and benefits. So they keep the scope very narrow and they miss the point. And some of the stuff that we've seen, the very minimum that you'd expect to see in a charity is, for example, getting gift aid right. And we see so many times that attitude to data is not part of that implementation of CRM. So I agree with you that ideally we should be seeing those broader benefits and understanding the end-to-end and the ability to take data about activity and impact and feed it right the way back to grant reporting. Absolutely, we should be able to do that. But I don't think many organizations, even the big ones, are really cracking everything that needs to be done in order to make that happen in terms of capability within the organization.
Yeah. I just think there was the benefits and understanding the benefits, then it's not replacing like for like. It's the opportunity to make changes. And I think sometimes when we engage in projects, there's a fine line with a platform because anything really is possible. Dynamics is in every country and sectors, insurance, banking, so sometimes in discovery or, you're looking at requirements, the answer is always yes, because you can do so much. But it's making sure that, you're absolutely controlling that scope, but making sure that it's in a way that organizations know they need to continue to invest, and you're not going to get it all from day one. Once you're live, that's not the end of the road, right? Your benefits are going to come when you can do more and extend it more, and that's key. And that is, part of, I suppose, working with that partner to make sure that people aren't just replacing like for like. It's a lot of hard work, just to get a different system with the same processes.
And I think everything we just said there has started to unlock that piece that as you move from having a product, a specific product which does a specific task, and then you move on to that much broader platform, whether it's Salesforce or Dynamics, that there's so many things that you can do, that you've got a variety of stakeholders that you're trying to please across the organization. You've got a variety of different processes that you're doing with this new system, and you've got different use cases, and you've got different people, and there's a whole range of different things in there. And then that's when it gets very complex, but it's also that you can get the benefits. As I was listening to that, I was remembering back to being in a procurement for a CRM, and then I think someone asked some question as part of the procurement. They're like, "Oh," and we were talking about either Dynamics or Salesforce or something like that. They were saying, "Oh, but can it actually do what we do?" And they talked through a very detailed bit of functionality. And I remember hearing this question asked to suppliers, and everyone was like, "Yeah, of course it can do that because it's configurable." And they're like, "Oh, right, that's great, it can do that, tick the box." But of course, without realizing, the more configurable you go, the more you do that, the more you've added on the cost to your overall solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah. And Tori, I was looking at you as I was saying that, because obviously you sit on the other side of that, where you hear people asking that, and do you often find that people do? They are keen to give something to everyone, and they want to configure it to death, and you're kind of like, that might not be the route to go down.
Fine balance, because you're trying to demonstrate the flexibility of a platform and what it can do and what you can do, so a bit of this is the art of the possible. This is how great it could be, but actually you're trying to keep their feet on the ground, because they're not going to get that for quite a while. I suppose you're right. We very much lead on low code, no code. So we don't really do any coding. Like back in the day, 10 years ago, you'd have to code things, JavaScript, .NET to do really simple things. Whereas now that's just not the norm. Okay. This no code, no code. We very much lean on the no code. So unless you can configure it, drag and drop and configure it using, standard configuration tools, we typically say no. That's a decision that we'd make with the client. Typically project sponsored would have to sign off anything that needs complex code, because otherwise people want it. You see in workshops, they want it to make the tea. They want it to do everything. Oh wow, this is so good. It can, can you create workflows to send alerts and do this? Well, you can, but do you always want loads of alerts? It's not going to work. You need to drive people to dashboards, rather than trigger alerts every time somebody makes a donation over £5 or something. So you have to say no. And I think, even though things can be achieved, you have to say no. Otherwise, that timeline is tripled, that budget is, and, it's cost versus benefit.
And can I just take that just one tiny little step further? So supposing I'm in an organization and we do have a lot of money for it and we do have a long timeline and we think actually this is the critical bit of software for our organization. So we've heard what you said all about configuring and adding in some code to do these things, but we're pretty confident in our ability to run a good project. We're pretty confident that we've got the budget for doing this. Would you still advise against it? As Laura, you're nodding away there. And so it's Kevin, do one of you want to step in and say why?
Kevin, you go first.
Apologies, Stuart. This feels a little bit like therapy for a few of us here on the call, but there's something, as Tory was speaking, around, like, everyone's a CRM expert. Unfortunately, a lot of the settings that we work in, lots of people have got previous history. Even when you say those words like Dynamics and Salesforce, people have got history or baggage or stories to tell. And then we live in a world at the moment of, there's almost like digital hallucination or digital rejection. Okay. And what I mean by that is, on the hallucination front, Salesforce or Dynamics is going to solve all of these things. And you think, well, yeah, it potentially could do. But what I tend to find I'm doing is trying to plot a very sensible roadmap and journey to prove it, and to prove, like, some of the value points that Tory was saying, or even what Laura was saying about gift aid, or something that's get the straightforward things sorted early and quickly, and build incremental value on top of that for later stages when you can fly, so to speak. I'm always taking a fairly cautious approach. We have to remember there is a well-trodden stat out there about CRMs, not just in the non-profit sector, but in industry in general, saying that 4 out of 5 have kind of time, cost, quality problems, right? And so we have to be a little bit cautious, or recognizing some of that, and building sensible plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can build on take the question you were asking as well, Stuart, about should big organizations with lots of money, not lots of money, but have got sufficient budget to do things, should they take the route of being careful about what they're doing in terms of code and no code and all those kind of things? Absolutely. Because what they've got to build isn't for today. It's for tomorrow. It's for the next 5 years. It's for the next 10 years. And if you start coding your way out of every single problem because you maybe don't want to compromise on process, then what you're doing is you're building the legacy systems of the future, and you don't want to be doing that. So there's something, if you've got the money to develop and really make the best use out of Dynamics or Salesforce, then some of that money has to go on how your processes work across your organization and optimizing the bejesus out of them. So if you don't do that, if you've got that amount of money to be able to do it, 50% of it should be on your change side of things, not on doing the code or doing the system.
I really like that. You're talking about building the legacy system of the future, which of course nobody wants to be doing, do they? Plowing a huge amount of money into building the most amazing legacy system, which will stop being used. Tori, do you want to add on that as well?
I'm just going to chip in two things on that. Firstly, it's making sure you're pragmatic. People come to us and say, actually, can you build a raffle and lottery system in Dynamics? Yeah, we could, but we don't want to, because we don't want to be dealing with a gambling commission. And there's systems out there that you can get which are a fraction of the price, to do that. Can you replace first class? Well, we could replace first class, but actually it does what it does pretty well, right? And we can integrate into it. So why do we want to replace it? So we are asked those people that come to us with the, large, have the budget, that's fine. And we say, well, we can do it, but we're not going to do it because, as you said, Laura, you're just creating a rod for your own back. And secondly, on the change side of things, we could build the best system, tick all those boxes, everything's great. But if change management isn't there, and if people aren't trained and the data's not right, it's a failed project, even though this, system ticks all your requirements. So it's wider than that. But that's just what I was going to say on there.
I can count loads and loads and loads of occasions where the celebration on the project was at the point of signing the contract. for the piece of software. You've done nothing at that point. Yes, you've got a partner, but please don't crack the champagne at that point. Actually do the project.
Takes a
Yeah.
long time to get to that contract point, Laura. Believe me, that is a
I know.
pedigree. Okay.
I take your point, but the problem is that everybody takes their foot off the gas after that, and I'm not the partner. The partner very rarely the partner's kind of looking around, wondering where the hell everybody else has gone.
So we've got two separate podcasts there. One is on project setup phases, on why on earth does it take to get so long to get from idea through to actually starting a project. Podcast number 2 is all to just how on earth do we spend so long negotiating contracts for months and months and months and months and months, and going through internal decision mechanisms, and then discovering that we've just missed that trustee board meeting and there's not another one for 3 months when we can get the sign off that we needed to get for such a large amount of money. I'm going to move on because I'm keen to know we've talked about charities in general here quite a lot, but charities are not a homogenous bunch. They're not all just exactly the same. They're not the same size, shape, set of stakeholders, anything like that. Do we have any views on how all this fits together with large charities, small charities? I know personally that I've worked with smaller charities who are using Salesforce and Dynamics, and I've had a bit of a question mark in my head about whether they've got the right solution there. For medium and large size charities who've got the teams, I can see Kevin's nodding along with me here.
Yeah, just I mentioned it at the top of the podcast actually for small charities, and I know there's a number of challenges, particularly with some of the solutions that you talked about in terms of just the ongoing maintenance and upkeep and the skills that are needed. I can't tell you how many times I've been with smaller charities trying to explain what release management is, or what how to keep the solution evergreen and the sort of steps that they need to take, or the skills that they might need for, I don't know, as administrators, which in the contracts that they signed with those organizations, what they've got to do to keep running the solution. So it is pretty tough for smaller charities. I don't believe the adage that, those solutions are not suitable for those charities. You need to have a really good partner, I think, or people alongside before you make the commitment, because they are hugely configurable. There are upsides, right? I mean, in terms of the richness and the scalability, the integration with the rest of the stack, a lot of that comes for free. And particularly, I know we'll talk about AI later on, but that adoption piece, some of the things that you're just getting as part of the standard delivery, that can be really game changing, actually, even for a smaller charity. In fact, there could be even more when we start talking about the agent forces and the co-pilots of this world. They can actually be more nimble at innovating and adopting some of those features to just try them out.
What I'd say I've seen is that there's a strong danger you start off with using Salesforce or Dynamics, and you think you've got a fairly self-contained small piece of work, but as you start seeing all the things you can do with it, you end up doing more. And then at the start, if you'd ask yourself this question, how much do I want to spend on support and maintenance in a year, either in terms of a partner or in terms of the people I want to employ? And if you're a smaller charity, the answer, and by smaller charity I mean under 100 people or something like that, in terms of people or under, then the answer is probably going to be really not very much, definitely not more than one person at the most, probably, and probably maybe in terms of support costs, maybe I don't want a support contract worth more than 30,000. But in the world of Salesforce and Dynamics, it's so easy to get way beyond that. So for small charities, I've seen that they need to be really focused on what they want to get from it and be really clear on that.
There's a feeling, it's a feeling I have, and it's something that I've kind of seen is you talked about the people that you might need in order to build it. And I'm not talking about partners at this point. I'm talking about when people employ technologists and digital experts. It's very difficult for a small charity to know what good looks like. And our industry, and it's something that I felt very keenly for many years, our industry is not a profession. We don't have anything that to an employer would say this person is proficient at what they do. This person understands not just the technology, but how technology will be implemented within an organization. In the same way an accountant does years of fellowship of learning what their accountancy in a business looks like. We don't do that. And I'm going to be really brutal here. Very often charities appoint a Fred in a shed. And even worse, if they appoint that Fred in a shed from somebody who's running it as their own little consultancy. And Kevin and I both do this. But if you've got a technologist who is running their own little consultancy, it's a one-man band providing Salesforce or Dynamics support. The amount of risk that represents, because you have no idea on the quality of what they're doing. So there's lots of problem here for small charities, and that comes back to that thing about the vast majority of people in leadership don't know what good looks like in a technologist, and the technology profession is not a profession. So it's very hard for them. And I think there's something there when you're coming to CRM about how much people charge for that service. If they're, I'm a Salesforce expert, I'm a Dynamics expert, you could be charging quite high, or your expectations are quite high. You're not necessarily delivering at the quality you'd expect.
It's very similar to the charity that gets hooked on a particular developer, and they just have that one developer who's really good, and they're like, oh, they're amazing. This person's gone in and they fixed this and fixed this. Before they know it, what they're basically doing is they're completely committed to this one person who they can't live without, and they're the biggest single point of failure in the organization. And you never want to go there.
I didn't know whether you were meaning, Laura, your Fred in a shed is like a contractor that would come in and do things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that's very different to an organization who brings somebody in who's an employee who manages the system. They're two different things. So, we often recover projects because people have thought, do you know what, we can do it ourselves. The number of days are too high, your day rate's too high, whatever. We're going to get a contractor in. So sometimes we've worked with organizations who've had teams of contractors in, and they haven't been successful because maybe they haven't followed the same, I don't know, naming convention or table structure, or they're not up to the latest of what's happening with Microsoft. They don't know what's coming out in the next wave release. And typically those have come back and they've said, we've had to unpick a lot of work. But there are some contractors that go in, brilliant, and we work absolutely, they become part of our team sometimes as part of the implementation, and they can go and do some of the, I don't know, configuration, so we give them tasks to do, and they're just an extension of our team, which works really well. But your original question, there is a size of charity whereby I think these wider platforms are not suitable. And I'm probably going to get shot down by saying that, but I'm not saying it's the 100 employee mark. I'm saying, in terms of, of an income charity, right? We do it on an income rather than people typically, of an income, then a product is best probably suitable than a platform, because the mindset and the skills just aren't there to manage it and take ownership of it going forward.
I don't think you can be shot for saying that at all, Tory. I think that's very much in the best interests of customers because I've seen this with organizations that have gone down a bad route. Something we were talking about there kind of leads me on to a question I have. There are these big tech vendors. We have Salesforce and we have Microsoft who can offer an awful lot. And I was wondering if anyone has any thoughts on what we think has gone really well there in the last 10, 15 years, what either Salesforce or Microsoft have been able to bring to the party, which has helped in a way that if it was just some small proprietary vendor, they would never have been able to bring.
I was going to say, and not only Salesforce, Microsoft, but also the ecosystem around them. So for the likes of mhance, for example, I think they've been really, really helpful. I can think of lots of situations. I mean, I think just in the time that we're in at the moment, whilst we're trying to navigate all of these, cost of living crisis and all this complexity around innovation and new technologies, I'm finding that, we've done these implementations so many times. There is a lived experience, but also how to navigate the future, which if you can leverage their research arm effectively, and particularly the social impact bodies of both the two organizations, they can really help you with the futures thinking around plotting out that roadmap. So they genuinely are partners, I find, rather than, a lot of people have got kind of a supplier mindset, and actually, what might our charity look like in 2028 or 2030? They can really help you with that, actually, and do a lot of that for free in terms of art of the possible sessions and things like that. They can also help you with funding. There's been a number of kind of catalyst programs over the years that I've found to get you started, to get you going, to do delivery. So rather than just talking about it, and this is where we want to do, you can get to proof of concept, proof of value, prototypes pretty quickly and get some financial help in some of these things as well. And I think that works really well with the various sort of partners in the ecosystem about where you want to go. So those are just a couple of thoughts.
I just wanted to say on the partners thing, I find the partners thing fascinating because obviously a partner is a two-way relationship. And someone was saying to me the other day about this wasn't to do with CRMs, this was about, they said, oh, what I try to do is with all of my suppliers, I try to work in partnership. And I was like, yeah, that's what everyone says. They said, no, what I try to do is I try to understand what they do as a business. And so I try and think, how can I help their business? Because then that makes me a really valuable customer that's working, because I truly am in partnership with them, because I'm trying to understand what their business is about and how I can help them. And then they can return that favor. And then that's how you truly get to partnership. I've heard so much talking about partnership in the past, and it hasn't really been about partnership. It's been a one-way thing. It's about how the supplier can help you in a number of ways, but it's not a two-way thing.
But first of all, heartily agree with what you just described there. And I think in terms of that understanding of the people who are giving you the service and what you can do for them. And quite often we do analysis about our suppliers, but we never do the reverse, which is analyze ourselves against what the supplier needs. And that's always worth having a little look at, isn't it? But going back to the actual big tech, the vendors themselves, and how they've improved things. I mean, I think that the number one thing for me that really stands out, and particularly with the Dynamics and Salesforce, is they've effectively created an architecture specifically for not-for-profit. And when you do that, you start to get to understand more fully all those things that a UK charity needs. Now, I know early on with Salesforce in particular, was a very American-based CRM, they had problems with things like direct debit and gift aid. But they've really folded those in. They've understood that. So I think that creating a particular architecture, and they did it as well for higher ed. So they had a higher education data architecture. I don't think they did with Microsoft Dynamics. So I think I'm not sure, but I know with Salesforce they did. And that gives you a kind of out of the box view about what it can do. And I think that's really important. I think maybe I'm a little bit more skeptical about using one of these big tech platforms for an organization that's 100 or 250 people in size. Depends on what they're doing. So I think there's a kind of cutoff there. But I think the big benefit really of those organizations is that data architecture. They've really nailed it.
I was just going to say, just picking up on what you say, Kevin, I think, funding is available. Okay, that's great. I think that some of the charities you've worked for, they're all managed accounts by Microsoft, right? So, but the model, how Microsoft work is very different to how Salesforce works. So Microsoft rely on partners who understand the sector. Okay. Yes, they have tech social impact or Microsoft Elevate, but in terms of that art of the possible, the real nuts and bolts of gift aid, the nuts and bolts of consent, the nuts and bolts of integrating to Stripe or Go Cardless would come from a partner. I think that's just important to note. And I think just on you, Laura, yeah, I mean, 200. A lot of our organisations and successful projects have been 250 employees. You have to obviously narrow that down. And then you might be 220 volunteers. I know, but ultimately, yeah, in terms of the sweet spot, if there's 250 employees, I do think that's a platform. Yeah.
Anything lower than that starts to get a problem. Can I just build on something actually that we were talking about with this benefit to organizations? One of the other things that, and again, it's Salesforce, I don't know so much about Dynamics in this space, is their user group and they're bringing people together. And I think if that is happening and people are partaking, I remember a long time ago, CARE did it, but they didn't do it all that well at the time I was involved. But Salesforce do it very well. Now, it's good to do that because if you don't, then all those people are going to get together and talk about you behind your back. It's much better to bring you into the room. And I think that's a really positive thing that organizations showing that bringing people together and sharing ideas and learning from each other is great.
Yeah, we run a user group. We are okay. So we run and that's I think some of the difference in terms of the partner and software. But Microsoft are very open to feedback and how you can add value and in terms of recommendations for the product. But partners typically would run the user groups?
I think on the Microsoft side, sort of like some of the groups like on Data Fabric or something like that coming together at the moment as that product's evolving. And I think, similar with Data Cloud in the Salesforce arena, those newer products and how they're evolving and how they interlink with the CRMs, those little service groups. I mean, in Salesforce terms, I don't know, Laura, if you're referring to, like, there's a lot of customer success programs like the Signature or Premier Success, and similarly on the Microsoft side as well. And I think the proactive way of bringing the stakeholders that are using that product and being part of that, it's a really good thing for people to be involved in. Back to Laura's point, it is amazing that these products, we've got this ready-made product. It's quite difficult to go, why wouldn't you use it? And back to that contentious point that Laura was saying about where's this sort of threshold or cutoff of usefulness? And if we say 100 to 200 employees, I find for the smaller charities that have grown really, really rapidly, actually, it's really beneficial being on a Salesforce or a Dynamics, okay? Because they just scaled straight into it and it was kind of ready-made. But it comes with loads and loads of dangers as well, to the points we were making earlier on.
I'm going to make a call out here for the other options. And I think somebody made a point earlier about if you've got one of these big things, the integration's there, it's all very sort of part of your ecosystem. But the world has changed, and it's changed dramatically since the days I was banging my head against a wall because of insert name of CRM product that existed that vast majority of charities used. It's changed a lot, not least of which is the technology around about data integration, the understanding of data itself. It's gone beyond big ETL programs of work to try and get data moving from one thing to another. We've really moved. So the opportunity for smaller organizations to use some of these more low scale, but still quite function rich products does exist. I'm sorry, Tory, if I'm kind of taking business away, but there is a really possible opportunity for organizations to not just go for the big ones, but actually think about, if they've got Microsoft Office 365, they've got the Power Platform, they've got Power BI, and they use a product rather than one of these platforms, they're not in a bad position. They've got opportunities there, and they don't need, and it will scale, and they don't need to have too much in the way of support and engagement to go with it. So it's a balance, I think. I'm sure somebody's going to lead straight down my throat at that point.
It is a balance, but why not, if you went with something that is, let's say, 70% out the box functionality, plug it in, you're 70% out of the box. You just need to spend the time, the client needs to spend the money and the time configuring it, that final 30% that works specifically for them. Because what they do is very different to that charity and that charity and that charity. They've got all the underlying core functionality. They've just got that. And whether they decide to use Azure Data Factory to get the data in real time, whether they decide to use Excel import to get the data, and they can choose the level of integration they want. And that's going to vary depending on frequency and volume and complexity, So yes, it integrates with Outlook and Power BI. It's inbuilt in Dynamics. There's no integration. It's there. You press one button and that data comes Power BI.
I get that, but my problem is when I'm going in and people have spent 6 digits on putting it in, and they're not getting 6 digits worth of benefit out of it. That's where I would question their choice. And it's not because of the product, and it's not because of the platform. It's because of their maturity and their ability to actually implement it in the way that it should be. And to me, if I walked into an organization and they didn't have any of what I would consider the critical success factors, it's a product. Just take something. Don't even try configuring something. Just go with this until you're more mature, and then maybe think about it. And it's not just about the integration side of things, but it is about that maturity and spending the right amount of money for where you are at this point in time.
I think that's really spot on there, Laura, talking about maturity. And so less about actual size and more about what's the maturity of your approach to technology. And typically, if you're a small organization that has someone who does the laptops or something like that, your maturity is very low. And so you'll struggle. I want to wrap up that bit around the vendors there. And so I'm going to move on to my final bit then about what we can learn from all of this, because obviously in the next 10 years we're going to have investment in all sorts of things, hopefully continuing in CRM, but I suspect there might be some investment in AI solutions as well within charities. And I guess, what can we learn from what's happened in the past, and what would we hope for? What would be our hopes for that future that would make it work well, especially with relation to the larger tech vendors?
I'll try and start with that huge, enormous question, but I, I think we've got to engage, just in simple terms. I think there is genuinely, when we talk about supporter experiences and supporter engagement, at the end of the day, nonprofits are probably competing with everyone else in industry, not just other charities, but there's a fight for attention. And in regards to that, I just feel that so there's lots of new capabilities that are coming through on CRMs. So I know sometimes we might get sick of the brochureware telling me about what AI personalization is going to do to my life, or how predictive analytics are going to run for future fundraising, or how I don't know, CRMs, ERPs, data lakes, and the like will all be sort of merged or munged together into one thing, or what's going to happen with the future of data management, and maybe, I don't know, democratized access or something in the future. I think we have to engage on these topics. I don't think it's there's a real balance here. I was listening to what Laura and Tory were saying earlier on around the simple functionality and getting that right. But I think those future things, in order to differentiate ourselves, we do need to make sure we make space and make time to engage on those and try some little experiments and things like that. There's so much great inbuilt AI capabilities in terms of supporter engagement on both platforms that can be just tried and tested. And maybe to the comment Tori made about looking at a dashboard and seeing what that does, there's a sort of do, learn, do mentality here, rather than probably a lot of spaces I've come for, which is, it almost feels sometimes like anti-change, anti-trying something out. And I think we don't have that luxury anymore. We've got to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I was just gonna read a quote from somebody at Microsoft. He said, "Technology for technology's sake counts for nothing. What matters is how it feels to people and how it impacts societies." The amount of times I've had clients from, "We need Copilot, or we need AI, we need AI," or I get a tender and then find with AI on a line, like, and I'm a huge advocate and a huge fan, and I love Copilot and I love AI and the difference it's going to make and all of that. But actually, there's such a knowledge gap there that, that quote is people just wanting to do something because it's new and it's there, and it can, without actually knowing what they want. And again, Laura, this is where they can say, you could burn through money. You could spend days and days actually don't know what they want. So yeah, I think, Microsoft are doing a lot in terms of education, in terms of AI and upskilling and all that good stuff. Bit of a plug there, but as our mhance, in terms of, you know, just not going in and bombarding people with all the technology without what is the benefit, how are you going to use it? How's it impacting what you do? Not just because, and I know we're going to have to adopt it, get that, Kevin, at some point. And, don't get me wrong, all our demonstrations have Copilot and AI in it now, but it's more than that. And I just think, yeah, it's not just ticking a box, right? It's a lot to that. And that brings us back to data. I know we spoke about that, but that's just my view. I like that quote as well. Don't just do it because it's new technology.
Absolutely, and the solutions are always in the shop front, but it's about the problems. That's what you should be driving you. What problem are you trying to solve, Laura?
Yeah, or what opportunity are you trying to grab? It's not always about problems. I mean, the first thing, and Tory, you said it, but you said it just at the end there, and actually I'm going to put it right at the front of this, is that no matter what you do, whether it's AI, whether it's CRM, you need to be good with data. It's an asset, treat it like an asset. We've been working with an organization in the past where the first words out of the finance person's mouth was, "I don't trust the data," from fundraising. And that's because they weren't involved with the data migration. They didn't get involved in how it was being done. And it wasn't consistent with what they'd seen in the past. And the one thing that organizations shouldn't be doing is spending their lives reconciling data. That's just a waste of time. So getting data sorted is really important. The other thing is that no matter what we try and do, organizations still want a magic bullet. And there are still vendors, none of them are present here, who will sell you magic. And so they will lead with AI. And that is problematic for many organizations because AI isn't the elephant in the room. That's data.
Yeah.
AI is the carpet over the elephant in the room. And we keep trying to throw carpets over elephants in the room. And we've been doing it for years. And everyone has said, oh, this will solve all your problems, whether it was information management or now CRM or AI or whatever. So that's kind of something that we need to get much more savvy about buying and engaging and being good buyers, not just good sellers. And then the last one is it's no longer macho for the top of the shop to not know anything about technology. It's got to change. And this is the thing that we've really got to learn about. So charities, and in fact, any organization, we're picking on charities today, but it's any organization, needs to get professional about its tech. That means that business leaders, the executive, and in particular, the layer below, or the layer that I call the marzipan layer, that they understand what enterprise tech looks like. So it's not just, I need to automate my little bit of the farm. It's actually thinking about what enterprise would look like across the whole of the organization. And equally, tech professionals need to come out from underneath their stones. And they need to be much more out there and much more connected. And it goes back to what you said as well, Kevin, about engagement. But I'm talking about internal teams being much more engaged with their organization. I said the other day, if an internal team doesn't want to engage with the rest of the organization, what is the difference between them and an outsourced partner? Because that's the key. So they need to understand business. And then the last bit, sorry, is a lot here. The last bit is we all, as internal, the centralized digital data technology team, we need to get very comfortable with devolved technology because it ain't going away. And it's much, much better to work with it than to try and get rid of it or kill it off or get upset about it. So it's actually a good thing. And we need to learn how to work with it. Ta-da!
Laura's guide to well. I by the way, I like that bit about I think it was point number 2 you have there. The gap between the leaders and senior executives and the tech leader and senior executive. If that gap is massive, if you've got the stereotypical sort of IT person who sits in the basement and just knows their geeky stuff, and you've got the stereotypical board or charity leadership team who know nothing about tech, that gap is massive. And the conversation is going to be like a French person speaking to a German person when neither of them understand each other's languages. And the closer you can bring them together by the tech person getting out there and the tech team getting out there, understanding the business and the business units and how all those processes work, and the leadership getting really clued up on the tech, so that conversation is then a really mature conversation. That's got to be great for all of us. We didn't get as much into AI as I was hoping to. So I've had a lot of time working in technology and learned a lot of lessons along the way. I'm still pretty nervous about the various outcomes we could end up with AI adoption and the potential for wasted money within organizations and gripping on to things which turn out to be a complete waste of money, and the project that costs £250,000 is a complete write-off, or the horrendous risk you've created that goes up at the trustee board that they sit there sweating about because they're like, okay, what are we going to do about this? Are there any lessons we can learn from what's happened in the past about what we should be doing more of or less of in those situations?
If I may, it goes back to the devolved tech thing. It's already happening in your organizations. Now, if you are like I think some tech teams can be, you've stuck your head in the sand and you're kind of hoping it's all going to go away. So the one lesson I would learn is accept that it's already happening. You've already got products that have got native AI in them and people will already be using them. So get out there, have conversations, speak to people, don't be defensive. Please, God, don't be defensive. And actually start to have conversations about it and find out what's going on. Because if you don't, it's going to happen in a very non-future facing way. And you want it to be future facing. So you're going to have to speak to people. I'm really sorry for all the IT people who don't want to speak to people, but you're going to have to speak to people.
I think quite soon IT people will they still exist? We're all tech and digital and all sorts of other words. The
You
IT.
shouldn't use the word IT. It's downright diminutive and I hate it. So I'm sorry I used it. It's the wrong term. There's no such thing as an IT person. They're technologists.
But great points from Laura there. Tory or Kevin, do you have anything you want to end on in our future world as we go forward, making sure we've learned from any challenges we've had in the past?
I'd really echo what Laura said, and particularly that we focus, for example, on Dynamics and the Salesforce suite of products here, right? There's a hell of a lot of inbuilt solutions that you're just going to get in their roadmap over the next few years. And they're not there because they're shiny new toys. I think they're there because they're solving common problems. I can think of several charities at the moment where we're thinking very carefully about email engagement, for example, and what AI brings to that in terms of likelihood of when our supporters find it most convenient to open their emails and what AI could bring, or funding proposals, or there's lots of real world use case problems that charities face at the minute that potentially have AI solutions. And what's brilliant about these solutions is that you can try them out, test them out a little bit because you're paying for it. There's also a little bit of a movement of, no, we're going to build our own thing, and why would you? You paid for this solution. Why not use this as your way of first stepping into that arena? So give it a try.
Tory, any last words?
I'm just going to, my last word is two things. So just following on from Laura, data. None of this stuff can work if the data's not right. Again, we could build the best system, we could have the best AI tools, everything's set up and ready to go, but the data's wrong. It's not going to work. And second is it's also not going to work if people aren't on board, and if people don't trust the data, and people don't trust the system, and people don't trust you as an organization and you as a partner and everything. So people, if we have to put people first on all these projects going forward. If I look back on those projects that maybe haven't been delivered as well or as smoothly, should I say, as some other projects, I'd put it down to two reasons. One, nobody owned the data in the organization throughout the implementation. Thank you for nodding and thumbs up. And secondly, really, is that the change management and bringing the people on board, it wasn't there. Here's your new system. Here's a couple of days training, go and use it. These people need to come. They need to be involved at the start. People and data will make or break a project.
Just build on that a little bit on the people side. If I walk into an organization and this is when I was employed, and the top of the shop is a dysfunctional top table, it's not going to work. It's going to work really badly. So if they're not getting on, or they're in competition with each other, the layer below will also be in competition with each other. And at that point, trying to deliver an enterprise-wide platform solution that will bring everything together will make buy-in very difficult because there'll be factions. So there's something about the way organizations are operating or have operated in the past. I still think it's a problem where they're not a cohesive top team.
But sometimes that's because everybody wants that legacy. That's my data. They're my contacts.
Yeah.
No, they're my contacts. They're my contacts. So the whole project is about breaking down the silos, right? Making everyone work together as a team. But you've got people maybe at a level above who are like, oh no, my target's to bring in to that's mine. So that's the challenge as well. And I get that, Laura, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to deliver an enterprise-wide project, break down those silos. People only have access to their data, all that sort of stuff. But then people are, no, you know what I mean? They're mine.
Which is neatly where we started. We were talking about what brings complexity in projects. And if you've got multi-stakeholder, multi-group projects where the teams are already at each other's throats, that's going to be an exceptionally difficult project. I would like to say thank you. We've had some really great people on here. We've got two exceptional consultants, Laura, what she's doing at Leadily, and Kevin as well. I know the amazing stuff you're doing. And we've also got Tory from mhance, who are an amazing consultancy. But what I wanted to say is there are other people out there. Just so we've talked a lot about Microsoft, we've talked a lot about Salesforce, and there are some brilliant other Microsoft implementation consultancies out there, some fantastic Salesforce partners who will do some amazing things. And there's a great network of consultants out there doing some wonderful stuff. But I'm happy to have some of the best in here on my podcast today. So thank you very much, Tory, Laura, and Kevin. It's been fantastic having you on.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant.
Thank you.